Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Welcome to the Ear Law Podcast. I am your host, Chaz Stumbo. Hey, good Sunday afternoon, evening, everybody. I have got a great show for you here tonight. I have a friend by the name of Jeff Reed who reached out to me and put me in touch with my guest tonight. And I'd heard of Lyle before, watching all of the documentaries that he's been a part of and all of the Small Town Monster series that he's been a part of. And I didn't know at that time, watching those documentaries, that Lyle had a crap ton of books available that he had written. So let's give you a little bit of a background on Lyle, and then we'll talk about some of the books, and then we'll bring Lyle in here. So Lyle Blackburn is a native Texan known for his work as an author, podcaster, cryptid researcher, and musician. His early attraction to cryptid creatures and strange phenomena has resulted in a lifelong exploration of these subjects. Lyle has written several acclaimed books, including The Beast of Boggy Creek and Texas Bigfoot, which offer a balanced view of the topics while delivering gripping accounts of real-life mysteries. His research into the Legend of Boggy Creek reports in particular has been instrumental in preserving the history of this notable Bigfoot case. Lyle's a frequent guest on many radio programs and podcasts and TV shows. He's been on Finding Bigfoot, Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, you name it. Monsters and Mysteries in America. Lyle's got it together. I mean, he's a full package. He's the real deal. He's got a band also called Ghoultown. And I took some time to watch some of the videos today and listen to it. And I dig it, man. It's an interesting twist. You would, by the look of the band, you would think that they would be a lot heavier than they actually are. I mean, they're rock, but they've got a good twist to it with some horns thrown in there and some acoustic guitar. I mean, he's really set himself apart on that aspect. So let's go ahead and bring Lyle in here. Lyle, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for donating your time to come on. So my buddy Jeff Reed, who you had dinner with a few weeks back, mentioned, hey, man, you should get Lyle on. I'll put you in touch with Lyle. And that's how this whole thing came together. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on, man. And yeah, I just putting two together, watching some of those old documentaries and even some of the newer ones you did, like you did Momo, and you've done a couple on Mothman. And you've done Boggy Creek. I mean, I grew up listening to and reading books on that stuff and listening to Art Bell talk about that stuff. And, you know, watching these documentaries, man, it just keeps it fresh in my mind. And then to come to find out you're a musician as well, man, that's another thing we have in common. I'm a drummer and, you know, you front your band. So I just thought that this would be a good talk. So welcome to the show again. And you know, I'm sure growing up listening to these stories, is that what you got? Is that what got you into it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was just fascinated. Well, first, I remember the first thing I can remember, I loved movie monsters ever since I could remember, you know, and then somewhere I got a book that had stories of Bigfoot and Yeti and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, this is like monsters you could see in real life. And I grew up hunting with my father in Texas, so you know we're always in the woods, driving through creepy small towns. So all that stuff really just came together for me with you know, the mysteries of the outdoors and monsters in real life and all that stuff. And you know, it was just something I was always into. And then I eventually I was a musician. I was in bands all the way back to early high school and playing, you know, good kind of successful shows. And so I turned out to be a musician and also supplemented that with writing. So I've written for various rock magazines. I was a longtime writer for the horror magazine Rue Morgue. And then I wanted to write a book. And it's funny because you mentioned Coast to Coast and Art Bell. I remember one time somewhere I was listening to Coast and they were interviewing this guy about his book, and it was real spooky and cool. And I was like, man, that'd be cool if I could, if I mean, just if I could do that and get on this show. I mean, I just a passing thought. And then so so I ended up writing a book on the Legend of Boggy Creek, which is a big movie in the '70s, and it was like a documentary slash horror film that dramatized sightings of a Sasquatch-like creature in southwest Arkansas, which is super close to where I live in Texas. So I was like, man, it's based on a true story. So I went and researched that and just wrote the book just because I wanted to. And next thing you know, my publisher's, like, hey, you want to be on Coast to Coast? I'm like, yeah. So,
Right.
so there it was. And then like within a couple of months, Monsters and Mysteries in America was covering that case. And the guys in Finding Bigfoot showed up at my book release party, and we did that episode. So then I thought, okay, this is good. And I just continued on with that in addition to being a musician because I love doing that as well. So it was just like monsters and music, go for it.
Right. And what's amazing is, I mean, you started with Boggy Creek and then the floodgates opened and the dominoes started to fall and everything else started to fall into place. I mean, you were writing for the horror magazine. You wrote that book because you wanted, I want to be on Coast to Coast talking about my spooky book. You write that book and then you end up on Coast to Coast with George Norrie, right? And then the Finding Bigfoot guys. So you end up on that series, and then you just continued writing these books. So when you write these books, I mean, generally it's probably not just a standard time frame, but what does it take you 6 months to a year to do the research before coming up with the book? Or is it just like you're working on a book and then some little tidbit ties into something else and you set that on the back burner to, make another project out of that?
Yeah, that's kind of how it works. I mean, at first, it was more focused because I'm writing the book on the Beast of Boggy Creek. There was
Right.
no other outside things going on, and even that took me a couple of years to do that research and go up there and interview people and go out in the swamp where people had seen it and all that sort of stuff. And then I thought, okay, that's a good formula. So I did that with my second book, The Lizard Man, which is a case about a reptilian humanoid, crazy case in South Carolina that happened in the late '80s. And then it was sort of like I have all these ideas of things I want to do, and then people are giving me reports, and I'm on TV, so I get more. So then it was just sort of like I would take stuff and just file that away over here, and thinking about, well, what I want to write next, and I would just go on these crazy adventures out in swamps and across the U.S. and doing stuff like that. So then, yeah, it would just become sort of like a mixture of
Right.
gathering data and going places, and that would turn you on to some new story or a person who had an experience, and then so now it's just sort of like just monsters and trying to pick where to follow. What would be.
Right.
Whereas early on, when you're just doing it, it's like your first album or something. You're just you can take all your life to write it when it comes out, but then people go, "Where's the second one?" And now you got 1 year to do this.
Right.
And you're also influenced. You're playing shows, and so it's similar to just the floodgates.
Right. So when you were doing the Boggy Creek book and you were researching that, did you went and traveled into that area and you were actually in the swamp where people were talking about having the sightings? When you went there, how did you get information from people? Did you just start asking around, or you kind of looking up people that you knew were tied to the story?
Yeah, but I mean, I was just shooting in the dark, really. And the general formula for writing these books is usually I'll cover something that has some sort of public information to start with, usually like newspaper articles. I love these old cases from the 70s where it's like all these newspaper articles about this small town where they're seeing a monster. So I went to the library up there in Texarkana, Arkansas, where it's close by, and I gathered up all the old newspaper reports, and then I went to this little town, Falk. I just I went to a convenience store there, which is called the Monster Mart, but it
Of
didn't look
course.
then like it looks now. I've helped transform that thing into
Right.
a huge thing, but um, I just was starting to. I was just standing there and asking questions, and some little kid goes, "My dad," or no, he goes, "My grandpa knows all about the Boggy Creek monster." And I was like, "Really? Can I talk to your grandpa?" And then the mom came up and goes, "Here's, call him up." And so I called this guy up, and man, he had been there from the get-go. So now I had a local, source. He would introduce me to people, and slowly but surely, people began. I just kept going back and going back, and they began to share information with me that was pertinent not only to the film and the fame. I mean, I saw somebody make a comment that scared the crap out of me. I mean, everybody of that certain time loved that movie, but and then also I got them to take me around in the various spots, like what was historical to the movie, and then also it's a really swampy bottomland habitat that looks kind of like it did back in the 70s. It's really spooky out there, and then they would show me around, and eventually I kind of learn the places for myself. So then I'd take a canoe and canoe back in those swamps with a couple other guys, and um, and it gave me that perspective of the place, and that's what I added in my book. So it's about the history, but it also interweaves my experience in there and my reactions. And so when it comes to the subsequent books, people love that. So now I'm like, okay, now I got to go to the places, and so I've continued to just travel all over and go to various places that have monster sightings.
Yeah, and what's great is I went on Amazon and I was looking at the products that you have on Amazon with the books, and I mean a lot of these stories. I mean, I've heard of Boggy Creek, but I've never heard of Momo, and I've never heard of a lot of these stories that you're talking about. So now I'm on a quest. I'm gonna have to start getting these books and reading
Yeah.
up on, because I love that stuff, man. And it, I see that there's a couple of them that we've got some audio books. I see there's the Beast of Boggy Creek, the true story of the Falk monster. There's a audio book, so that'll be good. I can dive into that as I'm working. But I mean, do you find it as you're going through these books? You did Boggy Creek, and you're starting to hey, this works, asking these people and talking to these people. Do you find that as you write more books, it's starting to get a little bit easier to get this information and compile it all together? I mean, you have a formula, I'm guessing, that kind of helps you to get it going.
Yeah, sure. It is a little easier because I know what things I need to do in order to gather the information, and I have better resources now because I can just put on my Facebook author page or something, hey, has anybody ever seen a white Bigfoot? Because I'm looking
Right.
on something where people describe this whitish monster thing, or goat man, or a Bigfoot. Well, that people will help me. Yeah, man, talk to my friend, or I saw something, or there was a case here. So now I have that resource that helps me. But it still takes a while, and then the hardest thing is just picking what subjects, because there's a lot of things I would want to write about, but books take a long time, and I'm
Sure.
also doing other things because people buy books, but in today's world with streaming and all the podcasts, all this other stuff, it's like you have to be omnipresent. And I've done a lot of the documentaries with small town monsters, and they've covered a lot of the same cases, whether they did them and then I narrated it, or in several cases, my book was the springboard for, I'd already done all
Right.
the research and the info, and I had all these people, so that helped them to do the movie part, and those things have helped me by being present in documentaries and the books and in podcasts and whatever.
You had mentioned white Bigfoot. I'm sure you're familiar with Mark Mercill. You may know Mark. He's the guy behind the Ape Canyon.
I mean, yeah.
Talk to him. You should reach out to him. He had a sighting, and he was out with Bobo and a couple other people. He had a sighting actually, and he said they were two lighter colored Bigfoots, Sasquatch, that ran across the road in front of him, and was out driving his car, and the sun had gone down, and so you may want to chat with him if that's something that you're actually looking for stories on right now, because he had a sighting finally after all these years.
Yeah, I'm vaguely familiar. I think I heard that, but well, that book that played into my newest book, The Lake Worth Monster,
Oh, I see it. Yes.
which was something I kind of people ask me a lot about. Are you going to write a book on that? But the case to me didn't have enough to it. Um, but as things work, in the last year, suddenly I got some inside information and had some access to some archives that no one had before. And I thought, okay, this is good stuff. And this is one that happened. I was born in Fort Worth, Texas, and lived in Dallas, Fort Worth all my life. And Lake Worth is just north of Fort Worth. And this happened in 1969. It was one of those cases like where there was a ton of sightings and crazy stuff, and it was in the front page of the newspaper. And but that was in 1969. But it is like 30 minutes from my house, so it's one of those where things come together, because like a couple of times the library in Lake Worth has wanted me to speak over there, and they've had some little monster events, and then I'll speak. And I thought, well, I should write a book on this. It seems like people are still interested, so a lot of times that's what guides me, is not me like, okay, I'm going to write this book. It's like I just go with it, and the way things evolve, it's like, okay, that feels like the right book to write, and I still do it literally because that's what I want to write, not because I think, oh, this will be a good seller or whatever. In this business, I just do what I like, and people seem to like that. So
Right, because I think a lot of times people can see through, some of those books where people are just writing it because they think that it's gonna, oh, this is what people want to read, and this is going to sell 1 million copies, and this is what I'm going to write. And then I'm looking here on Amazon, and I'm looking at your various books that are available on Amazon, and I'm like, I'd read that. That's cool. That's what I'm into, and so with when we're talking about Bigfoot and the Lake Worth monster, is that what they believe to be a Bigfoot? Is that what that's about, or is it something completely different?
well, that one's a weird one, because the back in July 10th, 1969, several couples were parked out at Lake Worth. And at the time, it was not very developed. It was all just like dirt roads, and it was kind of a lover's lane kind of hangout, if you will, where people just hung out in the woods. And there was some couples parked out there, and one guy had gone out there to fish because the fishing, was supposed to be good, or was good back then. And it was after dark, and he was down fishing, and his wife was up in the car, well, I guess with a flashlight. Somehow she was reading, and she thought it was too spooky to get out, so she just wanted to stay in the car. And so she's in the car, and all of a sudden he hears her scream, turns around. There's some kind of white something that was on the hood, and kind of crawled down and was, getting at her in the passenger side window. And he runs up there, and he said what he encountered in that moment that stood up was what he called like a goat like creature, a goat man. He said it was covered in whitish hair. He said he thought it had horns, and it was, it was hairy, it was big. Well, he kind of tussled with the thing and ran around, got in the car, and drove off. And other couples were there and saw this, but he ends up driving to a cafe and calling the Fort Worth police. freaking out, and and they show up and respond, and they're like, what, like, and so they see a big scratch down the side of the car where he said this thing clawed at the car before they drove off. And the other couples arrived on scene and said, yeah, we saw this thing jump on the car. And so the police, they knew something happened to these people. Plus, they had actually had calls for the last couple of months saying that people had reported seeing some kind of monster up there. So that ended up in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram with this article. And so the first impression of that was like a goat man, which kind of edges into folklore, cryptids. Subsequent sightings that happened, and following that article, the next night there were like 40 people gathered out there and saw this thing run up on a ridge. I mean, it's just 40 people saw this, including some police officers.
Wow.
And it ran off into the woods. And um, subsequent sightings kind of described it more in terms of a ape-like thing, a large but white hair, very like an ape-like thing, and so it's somewhere between a goat man and a Bigfoot, if you will. But to me, it's just people reporting like there is a monster, and we're not making this up. There's a monster, and then you had multiple sightings and all this other crazy stuff. Um, so that phenomenon unto itself is a story, just with the police involvement and all that.
So are there still sightings up to this day, or is it just kind of that general time period?
Well, in that case, it went on for kind of tapered off after about a year, and then there was some scant weird stuff and sightings in Lake Worth. But after that, it sort of was few and far between. But it's along the Trinity River, which is a huge river basin in Texas. And if you start kind of looking up and down that, you start finding similar sightings, even ones that date back years before, and subsequent ones are concurrent with the Lake Worth monster to suggest that, well, if something like that exists, it could have been traveling up and down that river, because why do you coincidentally have the same kind of
Right.
sighting reports in that area? Like, so,
Right.
but of course, nowadays, Fort Worth, Dallas has grown so much, and it's way more populated, and it's built up. So, there's still woods out there and a nature center, but it's definitely not what it was, back in the 60s.
Right. So in your opinion, what do you think Bigfoot is?
Well, I mean, I can't really say.
Right.
It's hard to say, but I mean, I always looked at it in the sort of more romantic version
Right.
of Bigfoot. It's this undiscovered ape-like thing, or possibly a relic hominid, which would be something closer to us, but like a primitive, not like a missing link. That's kind of a
Right.
misnomer. But there's a lot of branches of humanity, if you will, or hominids that have died off, or we think they did, and that sort of stuff, or just this monstrous ape-like creature that can walk on two legs that is, has managed to remain unproven. Kind of like the Indiana Jones thing. It's like you're going to go and you may find this thing, but the longer it goes, and of course there's so many other theories, people think they're extraterrestrials, or they're jumping through portals, or they're interdimensional, or whatever. I can't rule that out, but I can say that these sightings occur in heavily wooded areas, in swamplands, along waterways. There's a consistency to those sightings that suggest it's a biological creature. So until proven different, I just sort of am on a quest to hunt monsters.
Any personal experiences while out doing this?
Yeah, there's been a number of things that have happened over the years, and I've spent a lot of time, just from hunting and then in camping, and then just in these areas. Um, I guess specifically looking for evidence, or just seeing if I could have an experience. And some weirdness has happened in various states, from Florida, and the best, I'd say the best sighting I've had to date which kind of trumped some of the other stuff where I didn't quite see something, or something was trailing us and howling at us that I never quite saw. Back in April, I was up in the Boggy Creek area, and somebody had told me that they found a, a boneyard, so to speak. And I had been there recently and saw some juvenile hog skulls that had been laid up on the banks of this really swampy lake, where I've been a few times, in a place where there's been sightings. And so I went back there, and I'm trying to find a boneyard because somebody said it had deer and hog in it. Now, a lot of hunters will kill hogs and will throw the carcass. So, okay, you may have bones, but very rarely would they throw deer, venison and stuff in there. So I'm up there uh, with another researcher friend of mine and my girlfriend, who does a lot of outdoor stuff with me. And we were just hiking in the evening along that swampy lake, and way back in there, looking for these so-called boneyard. And it I have never gone that far around this lake. I've been to it a lot of times, but it's very deep, gets very deep in the woods, and gets near what's called the Sulphur River. And we had hiked along, looking and looking. I never saw the bones, and we kind of hiked along that riverbank, and they were about, I don't know, 20 yards back, and I just saw this game trail that I had been all through this mucky stuff, and it's hard. I was like, oh, there's a clear trail. I just walked up it for whatever reason, just looking around, and all of a sudden I hear footsteps, and you think, okay, there's something over there. You hear animals out there. There's all hogs and deer and alligators and everything, and so I hear this, and I kind of turn and look, and there's brush, and then there's open spots with the trees, and like I said, it's very swampy. And I see one leg, I see two legs, and then I see a whole entire figure come out into the clearing between some trees. And my first thought was, there's a person back here, which is kind of weird. I mean, I'm very familiar with these areas, and nobody just walks back there. But I quickly realized this. It's not a person. They're not wearing clothes. It is uniformly black. I mean, like a walking shadow. And it was probably 7 feet tall. And I saw it for a span of maybe 3 or 4 seconds as it walked between those trees, and then kind of disappeared behind some thicker area. And then, I mean, you're just caught off guard, even me. And it was very bizarre. And then I tried to get their attention so they could look, because I thought, there's no way this can get away. And if it is a person, by now they would hear me moving. So then I got their attention, and then we sort of started going down, and it drops off back there looking. And we never saw what it was. I think in the span of me trying to get their attention and walking over there 15, 20 yards, whatever it was just took off. And, we looked everywhere and did not find it. And it was just a split second of the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, if you have no base of reference for it other than the stories you've heard, and then to walk up a trail and actually see it for just a second like that, I mean, your heart had to be going. I mean, the adrenaline's flowing. And did you ever think at any point that you were in danger?
No, not really. I almost didn't even. You're so focused on trying to see it again. While it was a bit unnerving, that was not what I was thinking of at that moment. And I've been in spookier situations than that, down in there well after dark. The midnight hour, and you're out in a swamp with one other guy, and some stuff has happened. So there's been spookier things, and the fact that was in, it was later in the evening, but it was still light. I was more focused on, all right, and I thought, all right, now I got 2 other people. All we got to do is walk down there, and even if the thing heard me and hunkered down, it's got to get up and run or move or something, and they'll see it too. So that's all I was really thinking at that point. But I mean, that's the thing. Any animal, they're stealthy and quick, and you lose your eye on it, and just gone.
Yeah, and I think that happens to a lot of people. I mean, you're well aware of that, obviously, as you mentioned it, because you're a hunter. But I think a lot of people go out there and they're out in the wilderness, the woods, the swamps, looking for something. And if they don't have a lot of experience being out there, they could be staring right at it and not even know. I mean, they can camouflage themselves that well that you wouldn't even know that you're standing there, or it could be 5 feet from you and you wouldn't know. So,
Oh, absolutely. I think, and a lot of people underestimate animals unless you're
right,
familiar or hunting, because man, they can move absolutely silently, and if you look right at them and they don't move, um, I did some training with some Marines, and those guys could hide almost in plain sight. And they told me that they said the secret is we don't move. We're not. I mean, they weren't wearing ghillie suits or anything, but it's the movement that catches your eye. So, I mean, if you're just generally looking, and these are thick woods, and
right.
it can be something 15 yards off. If it doesn't move or it's behind some of the brush and shadows, you know, the coloration of these things they're hard to see. So, yeah, I think something that's really trying to be elusive could easily do it.
Right. And you get the reports where there's, people see something peek out from behind a tree, and that's always been one of those things. I've always wanted to go out looking, but I'm in southern Utah, so there really isn't, as far as I know, there really isn't much going on around here. I know there is in northern Utah, like up in Logan Canyon and up on into Idaho, but I don't think there's a whole lot going on down here, if anything. But I haven't researched it either, so I'm not 100% sure. But I wouldn't think that this habitat here, being like the higher desert, I wouldn't think that there's really the optimal habitat for something to survive out here like that.
Yeah, Utah doesn't have as many Bigfoot reports. I mean, you kind of get them everywhere,
Right.
but yeah, the habitat, and it's just not well known. Now, I guess you would have to hunt skinwalkers.
Oh yeah.
Maybe much scarier.
Right, right. That's up north as well, or actually kind of northeastern part of the state. And I've never been up there. I've got some friends up there, but I've never been up there. I was always more interested in, the UFO stuff and the ghosts and that type of thing. That just seemed to be something a little more, I could do that from anywhere rather than have to go to a location, hours away, or, like say for me, go up to Oregon, to Ape Canyon or wherever to search. So we're talking about Bigfoot, but I know you've written books. I mean, we're talking the Mothman, and that goes back to John Keel and his book on that. And I mean, that's such a big deal. That was just a huge case. And then as we go through forward in time, people have claimed to see what appears to be a Mothman in other cities and in other towns. I mean, writing the books on the Mothman and doing the documentaries, when you were doing all the research and everything, did you come across anything that just, I mean, you kind of set back like, oh, Jesus, what, really? I mean, there's so much information, but did you come across anything that you'd, just blew your mind on it?
Well, I mean, what's mind blowing is that there were so many other reports, that predated the flap in 1966 and 67 that was there in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, um, where that's essentially what made the Mothman case famous, and where John Keel sort of started. But you look back even a few years before that, some guys had seen something flying around, and then sort of a history. And if you go up and down the Ohio River, where Point Pleasant is located on the Ohio River, that's just full of all kinds of weirdness, like not even just flying humanoid sightings, but all manner of weird stuff. And you just start to it's just sort of this rabbit hole of like weirdness. And I mean, of course, John Keel recognized some of that. And the Mothman case is one of those ones where, you know, I've been up there, well, numerous times, and I've even spoken several times at the Mothman Festival, which draws like 25,000 people at this point. You know, because it's gotten a lot of popularity over the years. It's this really cool paranormal case that plays in with the sightings of a sort of a cryptid, and then the men in black and the UFOs. It's got everything paranormal, you know, and it's just grown into this pop culture sort of a thing. And then, you know, behind that, you know, you do have these credible reports that sort of defy explanation, and that's where you're left with those. You're scratching your head. You may can say, well, Bigfoot's this undiscovered ape, but like, what is the Mothman, and what is all that phenomenon? That's hard to explain, and that's what makes it cool.
Yeah, it definitely makes it cool. I mean, watching the documentaries that you're a part of, and just sitting there trying to wrap my head around it. Like you said, you know, it's got the UFO aspect. It's got the men in black aspect. It's just one of those cases. It's just like, I mean, there's so much there to grab onto, and it boggles the mind. I mean, because, you know, you growing up, you're taught, you know, Mom, there's a scary monster in my closet. No, there's nothing there. Go back to bed. So you grow up and you're conditioned to not believe in these things, you know, and then you start reading these books, and you know, we grew up with X-Files and you know, In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy and Art Bell, you know, listening to all of these stories people call in. And the greatest thing, I think, with the aspect to all of the weird stuff with the cryptids and the UFOs and ghosts and everything, people aren't telling you to believe in it. They're just sharing their experiences, and then it's up to you to make up your mind with it. But when it comes to something like where I see a video of a UFO or read a story about it, and then, you know, I'm like, okay, I believe that happened. And then you move on to somebody with their ghost story. And then after a while, once you move on from topic to topic, you start to feel like, well, if this thing could be real, then this could be real. And these people have obviously seen something, you know, like what you're talking about with the goat man, the Lake Worth monster. And so many people claim to have seen it, including law enforcement who are trained to be excellent observers. You know, when they come forward and say, hey, I saw it, you know, we saw it running up on the ridge. If you're going to believe somebody, they're the people to believe. And they're not gaining anything from it other than just conveying to you their experience. You know, and as we move from story to story and state to state, you're the one that's bringing all that stuff out. Hey, these people I'm just presenting to you their information, you know, believe it or not. I'm not telling you to believe it. I'm just saying, hey, here's the information. Check it out and read it, and, you know, tell me what you think. And I think you're providing a great service because, like I said, a lot of these stories I had no idea about. You know, of course, I've heard of Boggy Creek and the Mothman, you know, Beast of Bray Road I heard about, and then, you know, Bridgewater Triangle. You know, I've heard about those just from listening to podcasts and then going and watching the documentaries. And I mean, you're providing a great service, and I appreciate it because you're bringing this out for everybody to check out, because a lot of these stories would just kind of fade off into obscurity without you doing the muscle work and diving in and bringing them out for everybody to enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I just find something interesting or a case and think, well, this is good for preservation. I mean, like in the Lake Worth, like I said, the library, you know, wants me to speak on it. I mean, it's of cultural interest, to the area. Maybe not to everyone, because a lot of people just dismiss it out of hand. But that's the thing. At the end of the day, there's just so much of this weird stuff. Even if you throw out 90% of it, thinking, well, these people are all mistaken. Even if 10% of that is people seeing things that are truly unexplainable, then that's enough. I mean, if one person saw the Mothman, well, the Mothman exists, and that's what you're left with. And I think nowadays, with the internet and podcasts and this, in the last 15 years of the content, just look at the content that makes up most of the cable television networks. I mean, it's shows like The Unexplained, History's Greatest Mysteries, Finding Bigfoot, Expedition Bigfoot, Chasing Monsters, The Proof is Out There. It's literally all just paranormal stuff, and you have a flood of people sharing their sightings now because people realize, well, the other people are seeing it, so I might as well, say what I saw. Whereas 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, you don't want to say you had seen something like this because people are just going to make fun of you. It wasn't as well accepted. But now, especially with something like Finding Bigfoot, I saw a big uptick and a big willingness to share stuff when that show was happening as they went across the U.S. And I saw, sort of an acceptance of people that had seen this stuff. And even if people go, well, I don't really believe in it, but, well, this one thing happened, suddenly they're telling you. So the whole thing is the world is weird, and there is weird stuff that's been going on, whether it's a UFO or a ghost or a cryptid. It's all been going on, and now we're really able to share this. I mean, you and I aren't even in the same state. We're able to talk about this subject, and and we can write books and do everything else on it. That we're sharing this to where people are starting to realize, wow, there is a ton of weird stuff going on the earth, and we don't just know everything that we presume to know.
Right. I mean, they're finding new species down in the Amazon all the time, and that they brand new species of spider, brand new species of, a bird, you name it. They're finding these new species that they didn't even know existed. And there's so much of our country, deep in the woods and the swamps and everything, that has never been explored. That is quite possibly a human has never even stepped foot in that part, and it's not such a stretch to believe that there could be something there that we have no base of reference for, and when these people have these sightings, like with the Lake Worth monster, he said it was a goat and it for a head and it had horns. That may or may not be true, but that was his only base of reference. He was trying to come up with something to describe what he saw that scared the hell out of him. And obviously that was the first thing that came to his mind. So, we don't have a reference for a lot of these things, and now with these shows, people, like you said, people are opening up, and people are, coming forth with their sightings and their experiences, and it's only adding validity to the reports from years ago that are, matching the reports of today. And I think that, like you said, with the internet, allowing people to do this, whether they want to put their name to it or they want to do it anonymously, it's only adding to it all, and it's so accessible for everybody. And again, with the media that you're putting out, whether it books or the documentaries, I mean, you're a big part of that. And being a musician and a fan of music, I love live music. So I'm one of the bootleg guys. I collect all the live music. If it's live Led Zeppelin, I've got it. And for me, it's just kind of like, well, that's preserving it for me, so I have it to listen to later, or to pass it down to my grandkids to listen to it later. And that's kind of what you're doing, but with the information on these 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 weird tales and experiences that these people are having. To me, that's kind of the same thing, because you're documenting it just like the old tapers used to document the concerts for everybody to enjoy, throughout the rest of time. And you're doing that. And I got to say again, thank you for doing that, because a lot of these stories would probably just fade off into obscurity without you putting the legwork into bringing it out for everybody to enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in retrospect, that's where we see the value. Somebody recorded that Led Zeppelin show, and like,
Right.
well, good thing he did, because you can't go back and record it now. There's no
Right.
second takes.
Nope.
So
Nope.
yeah, some of these I think are important, especially if I see people asking me to comment on these or speak on it or whatever. I said, well, somebody's interested, and I've always thought it was cool, so I'll that's just something I like to do, and preserve that information, because I mean, I early on, before there were podcasts and very many TV shows on this, other than like In Search Of, well, I had to read books, John Green's books or Lauren Coleman's books on these subjects, and I loved reading those books, and it had a huge influence on me. So I liked the part about writing books, um, and preserving it, and I can include photos and all this other stuff, so it's preserving history, but it's also pushing forward like my investigation into it, my reaction, my experience, and if I'll be the first one to call out something that I think is BS. I don't include everything, or just because somebody said they saw something, there's got to be some credibility to it. So, because there's enough of it, you don't have to include the ridiculous stuff. So, I try to keep this, and in a way, I always write my books for those people that may not believe. And I'm not trying to convince anybody to believe in anything. I just say, here's what happened. Here's what these people said, and here's all this crazy stuff that happened. That's the story. You can decide for yourself. I'm not trying to sell somebody on believing anything, because ultimately we don't have proof. All we can say is something weird happened, or somebody saw something that's unexplainable. So people have to know for themselves and judge for themselves, and everybody's got a different opinion based on their open-mindedness, their culture, their raisings, the way their parents talked about it. Everybody's coming at it from a different angle. So I just write the books as sort of like, this is really cool monster history.
Right. Have there been leads that you've started to follow that have obviously, you think, man, there's, a couple of people have seen this thing. There might be some meat on this bone, only to find out that there's nothing to it, or it was a hoax.
Yeah. There's been some where, there's a purported monster. It had some newspaper coverage. It has a cool name, and I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. Maybe there's something to it, and then I'll look into it, and ultimately, there's not much to it. It's thin, and it was a hoax. And so I'm like, well, I mean, if it was like some grand hoax and the whole story was interesting in that regard, then fine. But yeah, I've just steered away and said, well, there's nothing there. I need to go look at something that has a little more credibility or whatever.
Right, right. So we've covered that stuff. Let's kind of touch on the music here. So you said you were playing music from high school and you were doing good gigs. And was your style, were you always writing music the entire time you've been a musician? Or was there a point where, later on, as you got a little more comfortable and a little more established when you started writing music for your bands?
The writing came later. The first thing, I remember asking for a guitar when I was like in elementary school, and my parents were like, "You should play piano." I'm like, "I don't want to play. Does anybody, in these, here's some example rock bands, they don't play piano." So I didn't want to do that, and they wouldn't buy a guitar. So I I kind of went in the back door by saying, I'm going to join band, marching band in junior high. And I went out for drums, and I got on it. And so I started as a drummer. And then my grandmother went and brought me a drum set. You know, a marching band, you only need a snare or whatever.
Right, right, right.
Um, my grandmother was cool. She bought me a drum set. Well, I started playing a little bit with like some guys in my neighborhood in like eighth and ninth grade, and then when I was just turned 16, I got into hardcore punk, like like early American punk, like Black Flag and Dead Kennedys, uh, stuff like that. And I went to a Dead Kennedy show, and I was there with a friend of mine, and I met some guys in line that said they had a punk band and they were looking for a drummer. And my friend goes, "He's a drummer?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I was just a little kid, really, and so I joined that band. It was called the Holy. We practiced a few times, and then we played in Dallas, opening up for a punk band called Channel 3, which was a West Coast hardcore band that had been fairly popular back then. We opened for them, and that was the first gig right off the bat. And by the end of high school, I was on several compilations with that band, you know, vinyl compilations.
Right.
And then later, I kind of, the guitarist for that band was, turned out he's a really good singer, and we joined this band called Solitude Eternus, which was a doom metal band. And in 1990, we were signed to Roadrunner Records and put out albums. That band, I mean, we toured all over the world, and it was okay, successful. It has since become a lot bigger than it was now. We've reunited the original lineup. We're about to headline Keep It True Metal Festival in Germany next year. Um, it's just huge. It's crazy, and I hadn't played with that band in a long time. But after that, I formed this band Ghoultown, which was sort of a Tex-Mex rock and roll.
Right.
Rob Zombie meets Johnny Cash. I don't even know. There's no description. I just wanted to do something unique, and it kind of had my Texas roots, like dark Texan spaghetti Western horror. So Ghoultown's been around for a long time, since 1999, and we've put out a ton of albums. We've also toured all over, and it's done really well. You know, and I didn't sign to a label. I didn't want to. After Roadrunner, in which we got no money,
Sure.
they continued to re-release our albums, and they sold our stuff to Warner Brothers. When we did a show recently, people had all this vinyl I had never seen. I'm like, what is all this? Oh, it's on Warner Brothers, and they sub it out to all these other labels. I never saw any money. But with
Right.
Ghoultown, I'm like, I'm doing it indie style, just like punk. And then the internet came along and streaming, and best thing I ever did um, is to own my stuff. So, anyways, and so I passed on that one sort of funny thing where you mentioned, uh, you know, the connection to Dokken and
Right.
playing that, and we were playing at this festival called the Ramblin' Man Festival in 2017 in the UK, and there was one of those double trailers. Here's your dressing rooms in the festival outdoors, you know, and Dokken was on one side and Ghoultown on the other. I'm like, this is so bizarre. And then you said you played with Lynch Mob. I'm like, hey, it's this weird connection.
Right. And you know what's funny was you mentioned streaming being the best thing ever. And I've got to throw props out here. I was looking up Ghoultown videos today because I want to play one here so we can take a little 5-minute break here. But dude, 23 million views. That's absolutely insane for an independent project. 23 million views, dude. That is crazy.
It's crazy. And that's only on YouTube. That's only on the video. It's millions on Spotify, millions on Pandora, millions on just the song or whatever. It's just, I don't even know how to explain that.
Right. I mean, and so millions on Spotify, which means you've been paid about $3.25.
Yeah, I think it was $3.25. We got that check. We all bought one half of a beer.
Right. So I pulled 2 videos down. Which one is the one that did 23 million?
Drink with the Living Dead.
Okay. So dude, the videos are insane. I mean, the production value on the videos are awesome. They're awesome. So let's do this, man. We've been going for 55 minutes, so I'm actually going to play that video real quick so you can refresh your drink, and I can take a couple of drinks here, and then we'll come back and we'll talk for about another 20 minutes. I don't want to keep you all night. I know you're busy. So
sounds good.
All right, man. So I'm going to play this video real quick, and then we'll come back. We'll shoot the shit for about another 20 minutes, and we'll call it good, man. I don't want to keep you all night. So here we go.
I was sitting in the Thirsty Devil, one sheet hung to the wind, when the back wing doors creaked open and a stranger sauntered in. He moved his head from side to side and glared with a sunken eye. I heard the spin of a rusty spur as he shook off the dreary night. He lowered his hat and checked his gun and headed toward the bar. He walked on up beside me, I knew he'd traveled far. In a voice as thick as mud, he looked at the keep and said, "One shot of whiskey for myself, and one for my new friend." The patrons whispered hushed hello, they seemed to be afraid, as if a ghost had stood right up and walked out of its grave. His face was shallow and dirty, his skin like leather hide. Sure spoke like any man, but something wasn't right. So I twisted on my stool and turned to him and said, "Thanks, sir, but just the same, I'm chasing worms instead." He growled and shoved the drink my way, his eyes as cold as death. I picked the drink to knock him back, held straw against my hand. When 6 to midnight in the phony hands of death, now you better drink your drink and shut your mouth. If you draw against his head, you can never win. Go ahead, drink with the living dead. Who the hell do you think you are? My patience growing thin, but swallow hard I had to do when the story began. His lips curled back and words came forth, starting up the tale. And every face inside that bar, it turned a shade of pale. My name is Stanton Creed, and I died 3 years before I shot a man to steal his drink. At least that's what they hung me for. Now I'm cursed to walk the earth and challenge every night a man to match me drink for drink, or by the bullet die. When 6 to midnight in the phony hands of death, now you better drink your drink and shut your mouth. If you draw against his head, you can never win. Go ahead, drink with the living dead. No, wait a minute, mister, no one makes me a fool. I push a shot of whiskey back on over towards school. I love a drink like any man, but that's a losing game. To drink or draw against the dead would only be insane. Stanton Creed, he tipped his hat and laughed a wicked laugh. You see, the Lord curse my soul for killing that poor man. There ain't no choice, so you must try to match me shot for shot. If you win, then you'll go free, and I can finally rot. When 6 to midnight in the phony hands of death, now you better drink your drink and shut your mouth. If you draw against his head, you can never win. Go ahead, drink with the living dead. That I was screwed. If I chose to duel the dead, then I would surely lose. So I took the glass and threw the shot into my throat. I would match him drink for drink, no matter if I choked. Whiskey, tequila, vodka, rum, and gin. There ain't no man that I can beat from being live dead. So into the morning, I matched him ounce for ounce, till Stan Creek fell over and a winner was announced. Now rests in his pine box and I still walk the streets, but I don't forget the night when Dad had chosen me. There ain't no fancy moral to go with this, I fear, lest you aim to kill a man and drink down his last beer. When 6 to midnight in the morning and the death night, you better drink your drink and shut your mouth. When your drug is his end, you can never win. Go ahead, drink with the living dead. Go ahead, drink with the living dead. Go ahead, drink with the living dead.
I found it! After all these years, finally proof! Proof? You found it? Yeah! Proof that great taste comes in small bottles!
That's right. Discover for yourself Blackburn's original monster sauce. Big taste, legendary flavor.
Dude, I love it. That's great.
Bigfoot.
How's the hot sauce doing?
It does good. Yeah. It's I don't even know. I just thought it would be fun to do. Then it turned into another monster. Now I have 3 flavors, but yeah, it's fun. People like it. I get a great response.
Good. So with the music, I was sitting there and I was listening to it, and I was thinking about this earlier today. You know, I grew up with certain influences. Obviously, you know, rock's always been a big thing for me. And then I, you know, dive off into other little things. I grew up on the outlaw country, you know, and there's a little bit of that going on. Obviously, you're from Texas, so there's obviously a little bit of that creeping there in the music. But I'm listening to it and I'm thinking to myself, man, that just seems like it would be a fun band to be in, you know. And I watched some of the live videos of you guys, and it just seems like it would be a fun project to be a part of.
Yeah, it's super fun, and it's kind of funny you mentioned that, because one reason like I mentioned, Solitude Eternus, doom metal, it's very heavy, and well, I didn't finish the songwriting evolution. I guess when I first started playing drums in the punk band, I was good at writing, so I kind of wrote the lyrics, and then when I joined Solitude and the doom, I wrote the lyrics for the band, even though I wasn't the singer. And in that band, I ended up moving to bass because I had been getting better, and I was like moving closer to the front of the stage, I guess. But
right.
With Ghoultown, it was my own thing, and I kind of left Solitude at the time because I thought, this isn't that fun. It's doom metal. It's this heavy subjects. It's all dudes at the show. Nothing against that, but I'm going to start a band that's really fun and throws everything that I like in there. Monsters, spaghetti western, outlaw country, rock and roll, punk, metal. It doesn't matter what it is, with this Texan style. And so that's what I did. So it's always been really fun, and we just have a really good time with it. Number one, we don't, like, if somebody messes up when we play, nobody cares. We just enjoy it. And half of the members, 3 of the guys, all 3 guitarists, acoustic and myself lead, have been in the band all, 25 years? 25 years. Same 3 guys with a few other guys, a few drummers, but that's because one had to move, and so we've always had a good time and been friends.
Yeah, and see, the fact that you said it's just like, hey man, we're just having a good time, and we're having a blast with it, and I wanted to incorporate all of these different things into it. People see that, and people can feel that, And I think, watching some of the live videos that are up on YouTube, I mean, people are having a great time. You're having a great time on stage, and people feed off of that. And I think that's a big part of your success with the band, is because you're just up there and you're having a good time, and that's what people want to see. They don't want to go see, I have friends that are into like the shoegaze, where it's just like, and the guy's staring at his shoes the whole night, and it's just droning on and on. And there's people that are into that. But for me, going to see like, growing up on like Pantera, where it was just heavy, but the guys are just having a blast on stage. And then you go see like White Zombie, and the guys are just having a blast on stage. And, bands that are just, and that's part where the punk comes in too, where the guys, I mean, you're just playing really fast, and the guys are just having fun on stage, and it, like you said, if somebody screws up, it's really no big deal. It's just like, if you only screwed up, it's gone now. Nobody's going to remember that. Let's just have fun. Yeah. And I mean, that translates very well through your music, and the videos that you're doing that go along with the music that are very unique. You don't see videos like that. And it plays very well into your music. And I'm sitting here watching, I'm like, man, those are cool. That's cool. And, the music seems like it'd be fun to play, and you're obviously it is, but I'm sitting here from a drumming aspect, and being into all these crazy drummers and everything. And then just sitting there and listening to a guy going, I'm like, man, that's fun. I don't really have to think about it. It's just fun. And so I appreciate it, and I love it, man. I love the music, and I think that, everybody should listen to Ghoultown. I think it's cool, man. If you're stuck in a rut, listen to Ghoultown. It will get you out of that rut. I guarantee it. It's fun, something cool. Listen to it while you're driving across the desert at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah, it's good driving music. People say that, like road trips and stuff. And, we kind of have heavier songs. We also have that sort of a little more country-fied influence, always with sort of a dark aspect to it, or horror. But, yeah, and that was that. I think that the longevity of the band, because, again, there's no real, there's no other people doing what we're doing. There's no genre or definition. So we can do what we want, and that allows the creativity for me to write different stuff and not be just one thing, or eventually what people expect from you. And if you go outside that box, they hate it. It's like, well, people pretty much expect Ghoultown does not stay in any kind of rules, and that's good. But also, I think that's hindered our acceptance, because people want to, what kind of music? They stick with genres, or we're part of this scene, or we're part of no scene. We're just us. And our crowds are made up of metalheads and punks and older people and kids. I mean, it's just all over the map, but they're all there and they're having a great time. And that's the thing. I wish we could play more around the world. We have fans everywhere, and it's like, it's very hard when you're literally, we have no management, no nothing. Like, everything is literally us. So after a while, we're almost overburdened with all the other stuff other than just playing the music or going on tour. It's hard to do when you retain that independence,
Right. With the success of the band throughout the years and the longevity of the band, 23 million views, I'm sure you guys have been approached by major labels wanting to tap in on the Ghoultown phenomenon.
We never had any labels except for a couple of small labels. Like, we have a label in Spain that has reissued all of our stuff on vinyl, or slowly doing it. It sells out immediately.
Right.
We've never had any interest from any label. It wasn't just like one guy who was doing something who wanted to help, but never any. I think they just don't know what to do with it, or I don't know.
Right. Well, dude, I mean, I don't know what the residuals come from on YouTube for 23 million views, but I mean, obviously there had to be a steak dinner in there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean I've made money off of it, and being the songwriter and I
Right.
own the label, the publishing, the songwriting, and everything on this. So over time, I've done well for it, and that's what's allowed us to, produce all this stuff. I mean, with no outside funding, no one has ever given me, here's some money to go make an album or a video. It's all one time. I remember the very first 1999 or whatever, we all pitched in like $100 each to record something and make an EP or a demo or whatever
Right.
it was. Not once ever has any of us put in our own money to do anything. So it's all come from making the money, our fans supporting it, and then turning that into the next album or whatever we do. But of course, you can only progress so far with no other
Right.
people in the army trying to help you
Right.
advance, but that's fine, because we've done well enough, and I do fine. I get to hunt monsters and make music. This has been my job or career for as long as I can remember. So.
Right. And dude, I think you've got the greatest job in the world. I do. I sit back when I had people, when I first joined, and how my story went was I grew up in Vegas playing in bands in Vegas. And then my band recorded a record that we never released, but we recorded it at Henson Studios in LA. And the engineer was a guy that put me in touch with George Lynch and I originally just did a 3-song EP with George. And George loved my playing and, we've got to put a band together, blah, 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 blah. Well, at that point, I was in a band called Earshot, and we were working on demos and writing for their second record. Well, the Earshot thing kind of, as far as my involvement in it, kind of splintered. It didn't work out for me at that time. So I had reached out to my engineer buddy who was also working with the Earshot thing, and he put me in touch with the guy that ran Henson Studios at the time. Well, that gentleman was also George Lynch's personal manager. So I reached out to Ron. Ron said, I may have something. Call me back the next day. Hey, I've got something. Just hang out a few days. I'll let you know. Calls me 2 days later and says, hey, you want to play in Lynch Mob and go on tour with Lynch Mob? I love Lynch Mob. I love the Wicked Sensation record and their second record. Grew up on them. So absolutely, of course. So that was 2003. That was my first experience climbing onto a tour bus and having somebody set up my drum kit for me and, showing up backstage and there's actually food there. That was my first experience with that. And that lasted about 7 or 8 months. And then George kind of dissolved that. Well, then at that point I had moved back to Vegas from LA because I wasn't a fan of LA. Just didn't like the people in LA. A few months later, I get a call from my same engineer buddy, Rob. Hey, dude, would you be interested in coming down and playing on the Earshot record? Same studio, Henson Studios. Yeah, man, not a problem, but they have to pay for my rental car. I can't, I don't have money to pay for my rental car. If they fired me, if they want me to come back and play on the record, they've got to pay for my rental car and feed me. All right, calls me back. Fair enough, they'll do it. I go down there, originally only supposed to play on 2 songs, ended up playing on 4, played on a 5th that didn't make the record. But the 2 singles that were released on that record, I'm actually on, so I'm very grateful for that. But went out on tour for 6 months. We opened up for Saliva, Seven Dust, Disturbed, Shinedown. We did some Velvet Revolver dates. So we did some decent-sized shows. But during that time, the band we weren't making any money. We were on tour support. So I was, everybody expects that when you're riding a tour bus and you've got an album out, that songs being played on the radio, that you're making money.
No.
I was getting paid $25 a day.
Yep.
$25 a day to sit there. Here's your $25, and then you step on stage and you're opening for Velvet Revolver, playing in front of 15,000 people, and you made $25. So there's that misnomer involved that everybody thinks that because you're in a band that's getting some airplay and you're on a tour bus, that you're rich and you're making all kinds of money. And just as well as I do, that's not the case.
No.
And
I was on Roadrunner, it was Solitude, and they're putting out all those albums, and then we were on BMG, no money. I made more money. We just did a festival in Houston, Hell's Heroes, a huge gig, our first time back. I made more money in that one show than I made the whole entire time with tour buses and the whole thing.
Right.
Thing.
Right. I mean, and I can remember that the biggest deal for me when we were doing the Earshot thing, like the biggest paycheck I got during the Earshot was there was recording budget money that was left over after they finished the record. So they dropped $3,500 in my bank account, which was my share. So what did I do? I paid my rent for 3 months so my wife wouldn't have to pay rent for the first 3 months while I was gone on tour.
Right.
That's just like, all right, that goes towards rent. And back then that was 3 months worth of rent. Not anymore, obviously, but back then it was, and people just think that, oh man, you're making so much money. You're absolutely crazy, because as soon as I got home from the Earshot tour, I was back to working at Guitar Center, selling drums and drumsticks,
One time I worked at really only one job in my life, and it was for a entertainment lighting company called Very Light. And Very Lights were the moving lights.
Right.
They were the very first, like back in the 80s and the 90s, every big tour, Rolling Stones, Madonna, whatever, they all had Very Lights, because you could only rent them, you couldn't buy them. But anyway,
Right.
I worked there for a while on the manufacturing floor, assembling lights. One time, they were cool about me being in a band. I went on tour with Solitude for a month or two, whatever, and came back, and then I started there, and there's a new guy working there, and I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going, or whatever, we got talking. Yeah, I'm a musician. I was on tour. He goes, oh, yeah, I'm a musician. I was like, oh, cool. What band? Well, I'm from California. I was in a band called Warrant. I'm like, Warrant?
Right.
Dude, man, I don't have any money. Like, I can't remember, it was the guitarist.
Joey. Was it Joey?
It was Joey. And I'm like, what? You're like working here for whatever we were making? And yeah, it was just, he had gone through a divorce, and you think these guys are, I'm sure he had way more money than you or I ever had to start with. You're in California, you go through a divorce. And the band had split up at that time for a minute. He had no money. He's back just like you. He's literally working bottom rung, I'm like, wow, this is crazy.
Right. We had my good friend Robert Mason sings for Warrant now. He was the singer on the second Lynch Mob record, and he was a singer when we went on tour. So it was basically, I was the odd guy out, and the other three guys had actually been in a version of Lynch Mob at one point, and I was like the odd guy out. I was like the new guy, and yeah, Robert for years was doing little bar gigs, singing songs with an acoustic guitar. And then for years in Vegas, I played in an all-request classic rock band, at Mandalay Bay in Vegas. And that was I worked at Guitar Center during the day, played drums on the Vegas Strip at night. That was my existence for over 15 years, and I made way more money playing in that band than I ever did on anything that had any kind of record contract or any kind of, tour bus involved, any of that. I made way more money just playing Living on a Prayer and Pour Some Sugar on Me in front of drunk people. It's just amazing.
And that's what I always said about, I wouldn't trade being in Solitude or being on Roadrunner and all that. But what I did get, buy the tour bus experience, especially in Europe, is you get a free, tour around the world, or even around the States. You've probably been to most major cities. You're like, oh yeah, I've been there. You know what you like or don't like. So you got this sort of free tour around the world. So there was
Right.
some value, but the misconception is if you have a song on the radio, or you have a CD or album out, or you're on a tour bus, that doesn't mean you're making money. And most of the time, there's a big gap between most bands and then the guys who have way more money than they know what to do with. There's
Right.
no in between.
Right. Right. And I mean, selling records is non-existent anymore. It's everybody, they spend their $12 a month for Spotify, and they can listen to it as many times as they want, while the artist is making fractions of pennies per stream, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't have anything that I have any monetary value attached to on Spotify that I would make any type of revenue from. So I don't know what the breakdown is there. But, with YouTube, I mean, your streaming numbers on YouTube are absolutely insane. And I don't know what the monetary value breaks down for that. But like you said, it's sustained you guys a little bit. And that between, are your books self-published?
The first three were not. They were on Anomalist. But after that, it was the same story. It's like, okay, they got me going and all that, but there's so many of these events, that Bigfoot conferences and paranormal events. I fly all over the place and speak at them, and I'm selling books, and I'm out here doing all this, and then I realized they're not doing anything. So
Right.
So then I just jumped off to self-publish. So the other, I've published five self-published books now. So which is much better. It's the same thing. It's like, and Amazon takes a cut and all that, just like
Right.
Spotify and everything else. But people still do buy books. That's the difference. Like, it's harder to sell CDs because of the streaming. And
Right.
of course, books. People still feel like they want a book. I have people come up and say, well, I've read this. I love this book. I got it on Kindle, but I want a real copy that you sign, because books just have this sort of vibe to them. And even for me, I don't have a Kindle. I love to read, but
Right.
I want the book. Or the comic book or whatever. I want it in my hands.
Well, I know that the one cool thing about Amazon is that, and I just found this out a couple of years ago. I had ordered a book off of Amazon when I lived in Vegas, and I got the book like 2 days later. And I open it up, on the first page, it says, printed in San Bernardino, California on such and such date. And that date was the day that I ordered the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I had no idea. I always just kind of thought, okay, Amazon has these big giant warehouses and they're just full of these books. That's not the case. They're print on demand now. So when you self-publish a book, you probably, all right, I'm going to foot the bill. I'm going to take, a couple hundred copies for me that I can sell at these conferences. And, I've already paid for the book. So all of that coming in is mine. But, like you said, Amazon takes a cut. But the coolest thing for me is that they actually print the book when it's ordered. And it's the same, as far as I know, the same quality as when you would go into Barnes and Noble and buy it. But the big difference, the downside to that for me, and this is going to sound completely weird, when you go into like a Barnes and Noble and you buy a book, and this is so weird, but the book, just as you're thumbing through the pages, the book smells different.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then when you get it from Amazon, where they've printed it and shipped it off, it doesn't have that same smell to it. And I know it's such a weird, freaky thing to bring up and notice, but I noticed that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, some people like old book smell. Like,
Right.
If you get I love to collect those old paperbacks from the 70s that are pocket-sized paperbacks that
Right.
like like Mothman Prophecies and all those, and they smell different. The print on demand, I mean, basically there is a utmost quality, but they're
Right.
not the same as the pulp pages that are
Right.
bulk print. I don't know exactly the process, but there is some difference in the process they're using to print bulk books versus print on demand. So that's why it smells different. But
Right.
maybe I could get like a spray and like old book. I could sell it.
Old book spray.
Old book spray. You can just or spray your buy this. I just got this on Amazon. Psst. Oh man, it
Right.
smells.
Lyle Blackburn's old book spray. Right.
I mean, I got a hot sauce. Why not a book
But
spray?
well, there you go. I mean, it's just like that stuff that they try to sell. The new car smell in a bottle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
'Cause, I mean-
Because there's a certain smell that you like.
Right. I mean, that was one of the greatest things. You get a brand new car. What's the first thing you look forward to is getting in that car and smelling that new car smell. Now we got Lyle Blackburn's old book smell.
Yeah, make your whole library smell vintage. People will think you paid tons for these books, but really,
Right.
you just bought them at a secondhand store.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, it's fun. I just signed hundreds of the Lake Worth Monsters books today. I got I did pre-orders on my site, and I included this cool Lake Worth Monster shirt. I love to have that sort of special mail order thing, and I even printed this. Let me grab one. This only people who pre-ordered get this cool,
Oh, right.
old school looking comic that my artist Jonathan Dodd did. That shows what I talked about, that couple that got attacked, but I don't know, he just did this, so I just printed these out, and so anybody who pre-ordered gets this little special thing, like because I like that. It kind of goes back to my old punk rock days when mail order was what it's all about. It was tape. You get stuff on tape and you traded and you wrote people, and I have letters from Danzig. I would write Danzig, and he would write me back. You could
Right.
write Ian McKay from Minor Threat or whatever, and they would write you back, like just, hey, yeah, thanks, man. Here, our latest is coming out later or whatever. It's really cool. So I love that mail order thing. So that's one thing I like about self-publishing and everything else, is because I can have that little extra touch. And the Amazon thing is great because, yeah, they're selling them up there and they're printing and they're handling it. And then on my site, I can sell autographed copies and I can order them at cost, sell
Right.
them at events or do whatever, or give my fans something cool extra you can't get on Amazon.
So when you order them at cost, are you actually ordering them through Amazon? And I mean, is Amazon doing all of the printing on that? So you're just getting them at like artist costs from Amazon.
Yeah, it's a weird deal because the back end is still the same order process as if you would be ordering whatever on Amazon, because it has their self-publishing. You log in, you got your books and all that, but when you go and place an order, they just give you that benefit, and that's kind of a trade-off because they are taking a cut. Like when it's sold on Amazon, they're taking a big cut. However, they're allowing me to order whatever number of books I want for all at the same cost.
Right.
It's not like order 50 and get a discount, or 100. It's just this price plus the postage, which is a cool benefit because every time I do an event, I'll sell whatever 50 or 100 books. So I got to order, but when you get it, it's an Amazon package.
Right.
Just they don't do Prime. You can't get it in 2 days. You still have
Right.
to. It's about 2
Sure.
weeks.
Right.
Yeah, I just ordered 200 copies of the new book, and here comes Amazon, and boom, there it is.
Nice. So through your website, which is www.lyleblackburn.com, you can order all of your products through the website, correct? What about like the CDs, or is it just the books?
Well, the Lyle Blackburn, what's associated with that shop, does not have the CDs on there. You would have to go to Ghoultown.com for those.
Okay.
That's pretty much the only place to get them there. As far as Ghoultown, CDs, but they're not in high demand. The vinyl we also sell, and the label in Spain does those. So I kind of have them separate, even though if I do an appearance, I'll have Ghoultown CDs on the table or whatever, because
Right.
I mean, there are crossovers, and people are like, don't you have any stuff by your band? So I try to offer that as well. But in a way, they're just sort of two things. You know, a lot of people go, "Oh, are you ever going to write a Ghoultown song about Bigfoot or whatever?" I'm like, I kind of messed with that, but it just doesn't vibe right. It's like Ghoultown has its thing, and that's the mode, and then I'm doing this, and
Right.
I mean, keeping them separate keeps their own thing, you know.
Right. Well, if people go to your website and order the books, do you autograph every book, or is that just kind of a special thing? So you'll autograph the book if somebody orders it.
Yeah, those are, you know, and that's the perk there is you can, you know, I mean, I don't personalize them or whatever, but
Right.
it's, you know, it's a signed book with my hand signature on there, and you know, you can get, you know, sell other stuff. You know, you can get the hot sauce or stickers, and oftentimes I'll have shirts and stuff.
Right. I know a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I'll autograph your book," and you get the book, and it's a little card that's glued in there that they've, you know, written on. No, you're opening the cover and you're writing on the actual cover. So there you go, everybody. Go to his website and order the books directly from him, directly from Lyle, to get the autographed copies, and it's written right on the cover on the inside. So that's where you want to go, lyleblackburn.com, to get those autographed books. So what does the rest of 2024 hold for you, Lyle?
From here, I have a lot of appearances. Like from here, I only have I have no weekends off that I'm not traveling or doing an event from here till Thanksgiving. So it's a lot of stuff, and then that's intermixed with a few getting out into some wooded areas. So that takes me up till Thanksgiving, and then I try to chill out in December and January, just to kind of. I will have done 15 events this year, or 15 just not counting some other little stuff like, oh, I'm going to speak at a elementary school. They want me to come talk to these kids that are interested in cryptids in Dallas. I'm like, sure, I'll do it.
Dude, that is the coolest thing. Dude, that's awesome.
Like,
right? I mean, that's cool. Little kids are getting into that stuff. That's the beauty. That's the reason that's the reason you're doing what you're doing right there, man. Those are future, future people running around, out there doing what you're doing.
Yeah, fourth grade, and like the teacher said, well, how much do you charge for this? I'm like, fourth graders, I'm there, I'll do it. I said, how about October the 30th, the day before Halloween? I'll come in and tell them how they could be a monster hunter like me, be successful in what you want to do, and to keep, I love that, because especially I speak at a library or something, you talk about keep your mind open. There's mysteries in the world. It's fun, and keep that sort of vibe that I had when I was a kid, and I'm watching In Search Of or Legend of Boggy Creek or whatever. And those things are perks. So yeah, just a lot of that, and filling all these orders for the pre-orders, and then I'll, during Christmas, while everybody's eating pumpkin pie or whatever they eat, I'll be thinking of the next book I want to write.
There you go. Well, dude, I've had a blast, man. I really appreciate the fact that you donated your time to come on here and shoot the shit with me, man. I couldn't ask for a better time. I mean, we have a lot of common with the music and everything, and I dig the band, and I mean, I dig the documentaries you've been a part of, and now I'm just going to start ordering some books, man. I'm going to order them directly from you, and get those autographed copies, man, so I can have them up here and I can read them. And so, dude, everybody, lyleblackburn.com. Go there, order the books directly from Lyle, straight from him, autographed copies. Dude, thank you so much for coming on. And I don't want to tie up any more of your time tonight. And I want you to get cracking on fulfilling those orders.
Right. All right. I should get Jeff over there to help. Right.
There you go.
Shout out to Jeff for hooking this up. I met Jeff in Wisconsin. That's the cool thing about traveling. You meet people all over. So I was at a paranormal event. He said, "Yeah, I'm going to be coming down to Fort Worth." I'm like, "I live there, right around there." And so, yeah, we hooked up. So that was cool. It all flows into the
Right.
like-minded individuals. So I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate it. And if you ever get to the point where you're working on some tunes and you need a drummer to hash out some shit for you, I'm your guy, dude, because I love the music. I had never heard it before. I'm sorry, but I'd never heard it before up until recently, dude, and it's killer. I love it.
Cool.
I love it.
Appreciate that.
All right, man. So I'm gonna be ordering some books and some hot sauce. I love hot shit. So
Cool.
I appreciate you.
If you like the hot, get the habanero one.
Oh yeah, dude. The hotter the better for me. I don't know what it is. As I get older, I like stuff hotter and hotter. So, Lyle, thank you very much, man. You have a good night, and dude, let's keep in touch. We'll chat soon.
Sounds good, man.
All right, peace, Lyle. Take care. Oh man, holy smokes! What a great interview, Kyle. This is just awesome. I mean, I can't get over the fact that he's out there living the dream and doing exactly what he wants to do. I think that's the ultimate goal for everybody in life is to, they always say, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I think he's found his calling. I mean, I'm excited to get some of these books and dive into them, and oh boy, the hot sauce. So LyleBlackburn.com. So as far as some upcoming shows, I've got in the pipeline right now, I've got Alan Greenfield. Alan wrote a book called Secret Cipher of the UFO Knots. And this book, I don't know how to explain it. This is what I told Alan. I was like, man, I've read your book and I don't know what's going on in the book, man. It's just this weird, the book's awesome. It deals with, all of the old, going all the way back to the beginning of the whole UFO phenomenon with like George Adamski and I mean, Aleister Crowley makes an appearance in this book. I mean, it talks about these codes that are buried in texts and it's a great book. I come across the name Alan Greenfield from when I watched the first season of Hellier, which was Greg and Dana Newkirk's movie that's on Amazon Prime. If you haven't seen it, it's called Hellier, Hellier. And it's about these little goblins that came out of this cave in Hellier, Kentucky. And it's another one of those things, just like what Lyle talks about, these stories that you hear about and you start researching and you start diving into. And that's what this I want to say it's a documentary, but it's split up into like 6 or 8 parts. And Greg and Dana Newkirk did this documentary with some friends, and they go to Hellier, Kentucky, which is very, very, very close to where my dad was born. So where my family comes from is like less than 100 miles from Hellier, Kentucky. And so obviously I gravitated towards this show, and they actually interview Alan Greenfield. So I ordered the book and I got the book and I'm just trying to figure out what's going on in the book. And it was just a little bit beyond, I just couldn't make heads or tails of it. So I reached out to Alan and he's agreed to come on the show. We just have to nail down the time. So I got Alan Greenfield coming on soon. Earl Grey, I've got to get him rescheduled. He was scheduled for a couple weeks ago, but he was under the weather at that point. So I've got him scheduled. I've got some other people I'm working on right now. Since it's football season, I may change the night that we do this. I'm not sure. That might be something I'm kind of throwing around. I also want to do something cool for right around Halloween. So got plans to do that. I'll be reaching out to some guests for that. Yeah, so again, we stream right here on Facebook, Ear Mob Podcast on Facebook, also under my personal page, Chad Stumbo on Facebook. Plus, we also stream live on YouTube. So it's youtube.com/Earmob Podcast. And then I also take these videos and I put them up at rumble.com/Earmob Podcast as well. I seem to do okay with views over there. So those are the three places you can find these videos. Again, I know on YouTube, if you subscribe to my channel on YouTube, you can hit that notification button and it notifies you when the show goes live on YouTube, so you can hop on over there. I do want to again thank Jeff Reed, my friend, for connecting me with Lyle Blackburn. I appreciate you, Jeff. It was absolutely awesome. Thank you very much. Lyle's great, very down to earth, awesome guy. He's got his shit together, which is such a breath of fresh air there, because sometimes people don't. And Lyle's just all the way around. He's got it together, and he's awesome dude. Jeff, love you, man. I'll talk to you soon. I want to thank you, send thanks out to Diana and Kelly Elkins for being here for every show and always sharing when I put up my events and just trying to rally the troops to get in here and watch the show. Again, thank you guys so much, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week when I have another show. Not sure who I have yet, but I'm working on it. Like I said, I got a couple in the pipeline. So everybody take care, peace, and I will see you next week as I get here to do the outro video. Peace.
You just listened to the Ear Mob Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow.